All right, my friends, more proof that we're looking at spending in retirement all wrong. That's the basis of my whole reason to exist, actually, is that spending in retirement is the number one issue that you need to contend with. And if you're looking at that number one issue incorrectly, then your whole retirement plan is going to be thrown for a loss, to use a football. Oh, no, I use football terminology. So we're going to dive into this paper by the NBER, National Bureau of Economic Researchers, a couple of researchers from RAND, the RAND Corporation, who get a lot of funding from the feds, gave us this going back to October 2012. And I'm going to prove to you right out of the gate that our retirement spending, our spending in retirement is wrong. I don't have anything to write on. But think about it like this. We 4% income. We're going to inflate that each and every year for inflation. All right. So each and every year you start with 4%. So if you have $1 million, you're going to take 40,000 out the first year, 40,000 plus 3% inflation the next. That's the premise of all retirement planning. And I'm going to go to my grave saying that premise is incorrect. Not that the 4% rule in of itself is incorrect. And I have other videos on why I don't. I like the 4% rule, but I don't think is applicable, frankly. But why the idea that your spending goes like this is incorrect. I'm going to show you not verbatim, just empirical evidence right now why that's incorrect. And so what this paper is going to show you is that spending actually declines when markets get crazy, and not just stock market economic. Your economic activities gets concerning, your spending goes down. And so to use the 4% rule and adjust it each and every year inflation completely avoids the idea of market chaos, economic decline, and things of that nature, for which you will reduce your spending. You're going to tighten your belt. And it's just common sense. If things are going bad out there, you're not going to spend on the same stuff you were spending on. You're not going to spend on Disney, for instance, if things are getting tight. So why would we say we're going to need that spending on Disney as part of our 4% rule and adjust each and every year when that's just simply not valid? It's an empirical evidence which shows otherwise, which again is intuitive. It's intuitive. So let's dive right into this. I think you'll get a big kick out of this. Don't forget the 4 S's: subscribe, share, say your comments, and then smash. All right. So this is from NBER, dated April 2012. Measuring total household spending in a monthly internet survey, evidence from an American Life panel. Now, before you say it's internet survey, it's not scientific. No, you just got to hang in there because you'll find exactly that it is. Michael Hurd and Suzanne Rowetter are the two authors, and they both are with the RAND RAND Corporation. All right, so we're just going to dive into this. And so we're going to show first and foremost why we need to look at spending in terms of the data sets that we've had before. So a very extensive battery of questions about spending along the lines of the Consumer Expenditure Survey, CEX, is not feasible in a general household purpose survey because of space limitations and how much money it costs. So we have the Consumer Expenditure Survey through the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is by far and away the gold standard of identifying expenditures in retirement. The problem with the CEX is it's very, very detailed. And so because they can only do so many surveys on any given time because it's so elaborate and so expensive. In the absence of panel measures of total household spending, a large number of empirical papers have been based on the panel measure of food in the PSID, the Panel Study of Income Dynamics. And so basically what this is saying is that a lot of research has been using the data from PSID to extrapolate your potential spending in retirement. However, food consumption as a proxy for total consumption, which is what the PSID does, it just looks at food consumption, which has limitations for research. In the CEX, the Consumer Expenditure Survey, the fraction of total consumption accounted for by food varies with income and age, making it difficult to estimate life cycle models based on food consumption. An example of measuring consumption with just a few questions, but more than just for food, comes from what's called the SHARE survey, which is in the first way of SHARE. It measured consumption with food based at home, food outside of home, telephone, and total expenditure of non-durable goods. While it's useful, it left a lot to be desired, essentially. We want more than that. So this Health and Retirement Study, the HRS, introduced the CAMS, the Consumption and Activities Mail Survey. Collecting total household spending in a self-administered format, mail survey. The CAMS asks about spending in 36 to 38 categories and allows respondents to choose the length of the recall period, last 12 months, for example. It has a lot of advantages, but it can be problematic in that people tend to forget their longer term spending over more than 1 year. The spending totals aggregate quite closely to consumer expenditure survey, and the age patterns of saving derived from CAM's data are quite close to the age patterns of savings implied on the well changed by the BLS consumer expenditure survey. However, when respondents are asked to recall their spending over a long period of time, over 1 year, recall error becomes very important. So we recognize most of the other spending and retirement data leaves a lot to be desired. The consumer expenditure survey adds a lot to that, without question. There's a lot of wonderful information. But when we go beyond 1 year, a lot of the memory deficiency comes in where people are like, I think I bought a fridge, but I don't remember. So these guys are creating this way to opt to use the wonderful data from the CES, but to extrapolate some of that using, trying to eliminate some of the memory recall where you forgot about that fridge you bought. The timing for a high-frequency elicitation of spending seemed particularly suitable in view of the high volatility in the economic environment, which would make it likely that spending would be more volatile than usual as well. In fact, back in November 2008, just shortly after the large and sudden drops in the stock market, about 75% of all households interviewed in the ALP, American Life, I forgot what P stands for, but American Life Project or something like that, reported reductions in spending in response to the economic crisis. So 4% rule, you're going to increase your spending each and every year. But we saw that 75% of surveys responded a reduction in spending reflecting the economic situation. Isn't that interesting? So the 4% rule would never see that. It just won't, because they're not recognizing that common sense says when things are going tight, people tighten their belts. Crazy, right? All right, so the American Life Panel, that's what's called ALP, the American Life Panel. The ALP is an ongoing internet panel survey operated and maintained by RAND Labor and Population. It covers the U.S. population at age 18 and over. The ALP approximates the distribution of age, sex, ethnicity, education, and income in the current population survey through the Census Bureau. About twice a month, respondents receive an email request to visit the ALP website to complete questionnaires that typically take no more than 30 minutes to finish. Respondents are paid an incentive of about $20 for 30 minutes of survey time and prorated according to shorter surveys. I didn't highlight this, but I thought it was interesting. The very large stock market declines in 2008 prompted our first financial crisis data collection. And that was where we get the idea that 75% of the surveys, they reduced their spending in lieu or in response to the market chaos and the economic crisis. In our first survey, November 2008, 73% of households reported they reduced spending because of the economic crisis. These spending reductions are of substantial policy and scientific interest, and so there is considerable value in careful measurement of the magnitude of the reductions. The widespread spending reductions prompted us to reorient the survey, expanding the collection of information on the components of spending. Each month, we ask about 25 categories during the previous month. Every third month, beginning in July 2009, we ask about spending during the previous 3 months on an additional 11 categories plus 7 big ticket items. Spending in these categories tends to be less frequent, such as durables. Taken together, the monthly and quarterly survey measures total spending over a 3-month period. The categories are queried monthly amount to about 60% of total quarterly spending, and the categories that queried every 3 months account for the remaining 40%. The 3-month schedule of 2 shorter monthly surveys and a longer quarterly survey has continued to the present. These surveys have several unique aspects. The first and most obvious is they are monthly panel surveys, whereas the consumer expenditure report, I think, is every 3 years. This design permits the observation of the immediate effects of changes in the economic environment that cannot be captured in low-frequency surveys via retrospection. Again, if it's every 3 years, you can easily forget what you were doing a year and a half ago with it and how that affected your spending. A second unique aspect is our measurement of a large fraction of total spending on a monthly basis. This measurement reduces recall bias for high-frequency purchases, yet because the surveys cover an entire year, it also captures low-frequency purchases. The use of a reconciliation screen in the consumption model described below reduces the noise in spending data substantially, allowing meaningful analysis even in a small sample. All right, so this is where it gets interesting. A total of 2,693 respondents participated in at least one of the 30 interviews from November 2008 to August 2011. In the interest of maintaining an adequate sample size while at the same time basing results on the approximate panel sample, we present results with a sample of respondents who missed at most 4 of the 30 interviews, resulting in an average sample size of 1,440 per wave. So basically they're saying, look, if you got a bunch of people that missed a significant amount of the sample, we're going to get rid of them. They're outliers, we're not going to use them. So we're going to use only people who do this diligently. Eliciting total household spending. Each month, we ask about spending in 25 categories that are purchased at high to middle frequency every month. Then every 3 months, we ask about the purchase over the past 3 months of 11 less frequency purchase categories and about 7 big ticket items. All right. The 25 categories queried in the monthly surveys are shown in Table 2, grouped as they would have been displayed. So let's go down to that. Let's go down to that Table 2. I'll show you because it's actually pretty. This is the kind of stuff you want to look at. You don't want to just look at rules. Is it not going down? All right, come on. Let's go down here. I'll show you the Table 2 right here. So screen 1, mortgage, rent, electricity, water, heating, fuel. You can see food and beverages, dining, drinking out, gasoline, other transportation, housekeeping supplies, housekeeping, dry cleaning, gardening. Just medical supplies, healthcare services, hobbies, sports. You can see, they're going nuts on all this. Personal services, education. So they got everything you could possibly want to know in here. Health insurance, the mortgage, the whole thing, which is what makes it just freaking an awesome data set. All right. Let's see here. In the first days of May of 2009, about 2,100 people responded to the survey, which was the initial survey about spending. The number was fairly constant until wave 15. So that's 15 waves later. Remember, they had about 1,440 surveys per wave. When it declined in May 2010, the wave declined by about 300 people. The main reason for the decline is that due to budgetary constraints, some infrequent responders were dropped from the survey. Since then, the number of observations stayed stable, hovering about 1,700 to 1,800 observations. In a typical wave, only about 25 people began the survey but failed to complete it. So again, the data set is pretty set in stone. It's pretty good, well enough to make it statistically interesting for sure. There is a very substantial age gradient. Those age 65 or older take a little bit more than twice as much time to do the survey than those less than 40, which is critical because the people that we're looking at is the retirees. What is their spending experience? What is their spending experience? And if they can take the time to really dive into that, we can extrapolate a lot of wonderful information for us as we go forward. If you were to ask a guy who's 40 years old, who cares? I hate to say it, but his spending habits don't mean anything for retirees. They just do not. So the fact that is more diligent on the people at 65 and older, it gives us a lot that we can go on. Now, these guys also use the reconciliation screen because there are some outliers. The reconciliation screen invites the respondent to correct entries. In the initial wave that elicited spending, May 2009, an average of 1.8% of the entries were corrected, modified, or updated by respondents. The rate of correction declined steadily until the survey collected in February 2010, and since then has fluctuated between 0.5% and 1%. Although this may seem like a small rate of correction, the effect on outliers can be substantial if the corrections are for entries that are extreme. And I tell you, they use a couple examples of extreme in the outliers. The frequency of magnitude of outliers can be a problem in self-administered surveys because there's no interviewer to question extreme values. The reconciliation screen is meant to reduce this problem. We then compare the standard deviation of the sum of all monthly spending items based on respondents' initial reports prior to reconciliation screen to the same measure based on respondents' updated reports. Averaging over all 30 waves, we find that the standard deviation before the reconciliation is 44% larger than after the reconciliation screen. However, even after respondents' own corrections from the reconciliation screen, there is a small number of large outliers that dominate both the standard deviation before and after the reconciliation in some ways. We recomputed the standard deviation of total monthly spending based on initial reports before the reconciliation screen and after it. In the first two waves of spending, the reduction due to the reconciliation was substantial, ranging from an average of 17.2 thousand to 3,000. In subsequent waves, the reduction varied between being very small in some ways and sizable in others, depending on whether respondents self-corrected some very large outliers. The reduction, because of the reconciliation screen, will have substantial effect on the standard errors and estimations of models of spending. Now, why did they reduce it? Fat finger. Someone put 10,000 when they meant to put 1,000. They might have done 0.01 when they meant to put, well, I mean, they give a bunch of examples, which I probably won't get into. They put 70,000 when they meant to put 7,000. I mean, all these different things. And those are outliers, typically on a non-durable item, a fridge or something like that, a car, where they're just, it's a one or two shot deal, just an out of it's a unique spending. So it's not a reliable spending, but it's such a significant outlier that it filters back in the entirety of the data, skewing it to look like significantly higher spending habits when in fact it's just been a fat finger or something along those lines. It's actually pretty amazing. And the reconciliation screen, while it's only less than 1%, are they reconciling that 1% is huge outliers. Again, the outlier, Jeff Bezos, compared to everybody watching this. He's the outlier. If we have an outlier like that, before the reconciliation screen, it's going to skew everything on the averages. So we got to get rid of that outlier for sure, or at least make it sure that it's legitimate. The Consumer Expenditure Survey has the most authoritative survey measure of spending at the household level. Yet the level of spending as measured in the Consumer Expenditure Survey is questioned because it's substantially less than the household spending as measured by the National Income and Product Analysis. Nevertheless, we will compare our measure of spending with that from the CEX because the CEX is a household survey and aims for a complete measure of spending using similar methods to the American Life Panel. All right, so, and I actually did some research on the CES versus NIPA and other spending habits, and it's actually, I'm not going to dive into it. The CEX is the way to go, without question. Yes, the CEX, the Consumer Expenditure Survey, is significantly less, by 30% or something like that, than some of these other ones. But in terms of the actual, how deep they get into the surveyed items is without question the gold standard of spending habits of retirees for sure. Let's just say they're 30% low, though. I mean, we're still not talking significant amounts of money relative to what we've been told by Fidelity's and T. Rowe Prices and insurance companies of the world. Average spending in 2010, as reported in the CEX, was $42,736. Average weighted spending in the ALP, the American Life Panel, was quite close, or 97% of Consumer Expenditure Survey. So basically, if we're going to use a Consumer Expenditure Survey and we're using the American Life Panel, they're close enough, highly, highly close. They're correlated. So they're both legitimate if you believe in any of them, which you should. All right. We excluded from the CEX published total for 2010. I noticed this actually too. I didn't like that. Personal insurance and pensions, because we considered contributions to Social Security and pensions as part of savings rather than of spending. We also exclude life and other personal insurance payments because, except for the insurance company profit, they represent transfer from one household to the other. I actually like that quite a bit. They're saying, look, if you look at the CEX, there's about, it's a decent amount of money of your overall expenditures they're accounting for that's going to personal insurance and pensions. And they're saying we're not going to use that. And the reason we're not going to use that is because those personal contributions to Social Security and pensions aren't cash flow. They're actually going to build up your savings and your pensions, essentially. So I thought that's pretty interesting. All right, so figure 7 shows median spending on the monthly items. The level is about $500 lower than the level of the mean, but trends and patterns over time of the two measures are similar. So again, the median is going to be lower than the mean because the mean's the average, and some of the outliers are going to skew the mean to higher spending for sure. All right. We'll get into the results here in the next video, but I just want to show you the framework here. All three samples show a decline during the first 4 quarters of our period study until reaching a minimum in the second quarter of 2010. After that, they all show spending increases, indicating a recovery of household spending. Average total spending declined from an initial level of $11,000 in the second quarter of 2009 by about 9.9% until it reached a minimum in the second quarter of 2010. Adjusting for inflation, the decline amounted to 12% real. So people spent less because of the economic situation at hand. They did not increase their spending each and every year according to inflation. We note a particularly large decline during the first quarter of our survey period. This time coincides with the stock market reaching its lowest reading during the recession and rising unemployment. All right, so over the recovery period from the second quarter of 2009 through the end of our sample period, spending increased by 10.6% in nominal terms, which corresponds to 6.3% real. Again, as people got more comfortable with their current situation, they did increase their spending. How is that related in the data that you have been trained to believe? Not at all. All right, so let's dive into the data. Let me just pause for a second and see where we are here. So let's show you the sample size of what they're doing here, the appendix table 1. These are the completed responses. N is the number of responses. Look, they got all these different waves of respondees, and they got 32 as a matter of fact, going from November 2008. And it's just by luck. It's perfect timing going right into just right into the wave of the economic crisis. Look at that. So we got 2,000, 2,100. A response rate is about 76, 70, about 3/4 of response rate. And they dropped down a little bit to clean out some of the bad data that weren't responding enough. And so you got 1,800. So you got 75 to 80% of respondents. So, on 2,000, 1,800 to 2,000. So you get, I think they said the average is about 1,500 or so per wave. You got 32 waves going all the way up to October 2011. That's fantastic. And the median time to complete the survey, 21 minutes, 11, 22 minutes, 23, 24. So you can see it goes month to month and quarter. All right. So you got the quarterly ones here. The quarterly ones take longer. All right. The month to month take less, but it's a wonderful data set. I love it. And so let's go now and see what the numbers look like. And we talked about before what they're asking about their expenditures, not just food consumption. Can't use that. Items queried each month grouped by actual screen display. Okay, remember they're giving someone, I hate to say an internet survey, it's not like, hey, tell us if you like Trump. Not that kind of survey. They're actually identifying data from the HRS households, and they're sending these surveys to them to go online and complete that themselves. And so these are the month by month ones, mortgage, rent, electricity, blah, blah, blah. All right, then you've got those 5 screens, 6 screens, all right? And then here's your quarterly ones, big ticket items, automobile, refrigerator, stove, washing machine, television, computer, whatnot. Follow-up questions on big ticket items, queried amounts in the case of cars, how the purchase was financed, property taxes, vehicle insurance, health insurance. Just the whole thing is trips and vacations. And these are going to be the quarterly ones, all right? Here you got the screenshots from the American Life Panel survey. So you get the login, you go in there and you say, okay, tell us how much it was, mortgage, rent, electricity, put it in there. Next, it'll tell you how long you completed the survey, how much longer have you got to complete it. Car payments, interest, and principal. Screenshots of the reconciliation screen is right here. Your household's estimated spending last month was $2,838. According to your entries below, blah, blah, blah. Of the described categories of 2,000 below is a summary of your expenditures, and I'll give you the summaries right there. The screenshot displays the top portion of the reconciliation screen. The dollar amount stated at the top give the sum of the respondents, and it basically said, whoa, that doesn't sound right. I'm going to go ahead and reconcile if I have made a mistake someplace, which is just awesome. All right, so let's keep going down here if I can. We can get the ball to, there we go. All right, so here's the fun stuff. You ready? Percent of monthly spending categories updated and unweighted. All right, so you can see that it goes down. Look at that, because of May 2009, because the markets are going, that's month to month now. You can see it just goes down as people are like, yikes. Standard deviation is sum of 25 monthly items before and after the reconciliation screen. All right, so before, that's where the outliers are. Might not seem like much, but look at the standard deviation of the spendings before they did the reconciliation screen. Again, the fat fingered and whatnot. After they did the reconciliation, it stays pretty stable. Here we got a big increase in July of 2011. Don't know what to make of that, but One pertains to, it is caused by two particularly, let's see, I think they talked, there's a peak in July 2011 in the line depicting the standard deviation after the reconciliation screen. It is caused by two particularly large values that we decided not to edit. One pertains to a household that paid off the mortgage, $246,000 mortgage payment, and no further mortgage payment in subsequent waves. And one pertains to a household that reports $200,000 in home repairs and $150,000 in earnings. Okay, well, that's interesting. So that both happened in July of 2011, which would skew the reconciliation screen. But they're outliers, but they still happen. Mean and median spending across 25 categories. Now, this is pretty interesting. So this is on a month-to-month basis, right? Mean and median spending. Let's see. Month to month. So basically, look, here's the median, 50% above, 50% below, and you can see we're getting about $22.50 a month. Now, this is not quarterly. We're going to talk about the quarterly here in just a second. All right, so this is just part of the monthly, part of your total consumption for retirees. 2,000, let's say $22.50, and then because of the economic crisis, it dropped down to $2,000 a month. Then it picked back up a little bit, and then there's that pick back up again. But we'll see. It went down and then slowly started rising again, the median, right back to $22.50 a month. And simply because that just shows you the issue is people will see the economic situation at hand and spend accordingly. Here's the averages, all right, and this is before reconciliation, the blue, and this is after reconciliation. So you can see that, and actually, believe it or not, the median, 50 up, doesn't have much in terms of reconciliation. There's a little bit of red there, so they don't really need to reconcile much on the median. It's the mean, the average, that they got a lot of reconciliation to do. But I don't even care about the average. I care about the median. So on a month-to-month basis, using all these thousands of respondents, they were spending $22.50, and then it dropped to a little bit less than $2,000, then went back up to $22.50 a month. All right, so 17 quarterly spending things. Again, the median is the purple, and again, that's a little bit of reconciliation. So it's basically spot on. And on a quarterly basis, these guys are spending roughly another a little bit less than $2,000 a quarter on top of the monthly expenditures that they have. But if we just look at the averages, it's about 50% higher. Averages here, about 50% higher. So you got to look at the median because the averages skews for those big people who are spending. You can't look at the averages. You got to look at the medians when it comes to your consumption in retirement, to where you can weigh your own consumption on it. I think that's pretty interesting. So total, and here it is, on a quarterly basis, the total median spending per these thousands of households was about $9,300 or so on a quarterly basis. It dropped about $8,700, something like that. Then it went back up. And so if we look at it, let's just say $9,300 is a total quarterly. If we times that by 4, that's $37,000. All right, that's $37,000 a year. And I think this 2011 numbers, I can't remember. And that's based on average number of observations per quarter, 1,600. That's real statistical probabilities there, or likelihoods. Statistically significant. Average spending on 25 items after correction. Again, I don't much care about averages. I care about median spending on 25 items after correction, seasonally adjusted and weighted 3 samples. 30 weight panel, 26 in cross section. So basically, at the end of the day, it's all the same. It's basically the median spending on 25 items is, 2,000 to 1,800 back to 2,000. We can just say 2,000 a month is your average spending on 25 items. All right, then we go down here. This is your quarterly spending. Again, average total quarterly spending adjusted for the 3 samples. And you can see from 11,000 down to 10,000 and back up to 11,000. But I really just care about the total. Let's see. We go down here. All right. Okay, I guess that's it. All right, good. So basically, let's just go back again, and that's the median. That's all we care about is the median for sure. So the quarterly is here. What did I do right here? That's the total average. I don't care about the average. I care about the median. So excuse me. So it goes down to about 7,500 in the second quarter of 2010, and then it goes back up to about $8,000. So that's a quarterly spending. Basically, what's that? $8,000, $9,000, something like that. And then if we just go back to the median on everything, it's going to be right there. Total quarterly spending is about, like I said, about $9,000. I mean, $9,000 a quarter is what basically you're spending on. Throwing in a little bit more for a higher expenditure is $12,000, and 12,000 times 4 is about 48,000. So I think at the end of the day, going back to the Consumer Expenditure Survey plus the ALP, which this is, you can be pretty comfortable in thinking that your typical retiree is spending between 40 and 50,000 a year, right? And probably more towards the 40,000 than the 50,000. And that's what this reflects. Your spending is about 50,000 a year, 40 to 50,000 a year for the typical retiree. And I think that's absolutely spot on. The Consumer Expenditure Survey would agree with that for sure. Let's just say it's off by 30%. So let's say the typical retiree, we'll just split the difference as 45,000. We'll say that undercuts it by 30%. The typical retiree in that case is still spending 58,000, which I think is significantly too high, but that's still less than 5,000 a month. I mean, these are real people, my friends. This isn't just we think. This is real people with real studies that they've done. So anyway, I love it. Hope you find this informative. As always, the 4 S's: smash, share, subscribe, and say your comments down below. I'll leave a link in the show notes, and always let me know what you have going on. If you want me to do other videos, just put them in the comments. I'd like to see what's on your mind. Thanks.